Angola, 1583. A kingdom called Ndongo. The Mbundu people have governed this land for centuries. Their kings called Angola, the authority absolute. Their territory rich with iron, salt, and trade routes that stretch across Central Africa. Into this kingdom, on a day in 1583, a child is born to the king with an umbilical cord wrapped around her neck. In Mbundu tradition, this is not misfortune, it is a sign. They named her Nzinga. It means she who is entwined with destiny. Her father, Angola Kiluanji, did not raise Nzinga to sit quietly. She accompanied him to councils. She observed diplomatic embassies. She learned Mbundu rhetoric and Portuguese from interpreters. She trained alongside warriors. By the time she reached adulthood, she understood power, how it was held, how it was lost, and how it was taken back. By the early 1600s, the Portuguese had established a fort at Luanda on the Angolan coast. They came for trade, they stayed for slaves, and they pushed inland, raid by raid, treaty by treaty, broken promise by broken promise. By 1617, they had forced the Ndongo king to flee his own capital. By 1622, they were ready to negotiate, not because they wanted peace, because they needed it temporarily. They invited the king to a conference in Luanda. Her brother was too afraid to attend. He sent Nzinga. She arrived in Luanda at the head of her own retinue, dressed in full royal regalia, composed, unhurried, completely in command of herself. The Portuguese had prepared for a supplicant. They received a queen. The room had been arranged with one chair, the governor's chair. For Nzinga, they had placed a floor mat designed to make her kneel, to make her look up, to make her physically inferior before a single word was spoken. She looked at the mat. She looked at her attendants. Then, without hesitation, one of her attendants knelt down. Nzinga sat on her back, settled herself, and addressed the governor from a position of perfect equality. The Portuguese had tried to put her down, to put her below them. She had simply brought her own throne. The negotiations were a success. Nzinga secured the agreement. The Portuguese would restore her brother's throne, limit their slave raiding, and recognize Ndongo's sovereignty. She converted to Christianity for political effect and was baptized, taking the name Dona Ana de Souza, after the governor's wife. She had walked into a trap and turned it into a triumph. She was not yet queen, but she had announced herself. In 1626, her brother died. The circumstances are disputed. Some sources say suicide under the weight of Portuguese pressure. Some say Nzinga. Either way, she became queen, and the Portuguese, who had just spent years negotiating with her, immediately moved to remove her. They backed a rival king, a puppet who answered to Luanda. They pushed Nzinga out of Ndongo entirely. She retreated eastward, and she began to build. East of Ndongo lay Matamba, a kingdom where women had historically ruled. Nzinga took it. She offered sanctuary to runaway slaves and Portuguese-trained African soldiers. She created the Quilombo, a youth military organization where young fighters were raised communally, owning loyalty to no family, only to the queen. She formed alliances with the Mbangala warrior groups. She opened trade routes north along the Congo River and severed Portugal's supply lines. She rebuilt from nothing, and then she went back on the offensive. For 30 years, Nzinga personally led her armies against the Portuguese. She was in her 40s, her 50s, her 60s on the battlefield. When the Dutch seized Luanda in 1641, she allied with them immediately. When the Portuguese pushed back and retook Luanda, she retreated into Matamba and continued. When the Portuguese sent Brazilian reinforcements in 1644, she met them in battle and initially drove them back. She won, she lost, she retreated, she advanced, she never stopped. In 1657, 35 years after she had sat on a human throne in the governor's hall in Luanda, the Portuguese came to Nzinga. They needed the slave trade reopened. They were exhausted. They offered terms. The treaty recognized her rule over Matamba. It returned thousands of captives. It gave her what she had been fighting for. She was 74 years old. She accepted on her own terms. Queen Nzinga Mbande died on December the 17th, 1663. She was 81 years old. She had fought the Portuguese for 40 years. She had founded a kingdom, built an army, controlled trade routes across Central Africa, and negotiated as an equal with the greatest colonial power of the 17th century. She died peacefully in her bed, in her own kingdom, with her sister appointed as a successor. The Portuguese did not defeat her. The Portuguese did not outlast her. She simply finished. Today, a statue of Queen Nzinga stands in Luanda, the same city where she had sat on a human throne and refused to kneel. Angola's independence movement in the 20th century drew directly on her resistance. Nationalists reclaimed her as a founding mother of the nation. Scholars at Colonial University, the Metropolitan Museum, and across the African academic world have spent decades documenting her as one of the most sophisticated military and diplomatic minds of the 17th century. How? She fought European colonialism in Central Africa with the same weapons Europe used against her: strategy, alliance, conversion, and war. And she held them off for 4 decades. They gave her a mat to sit on. She brought her own throne. For 40 years, an entire empire could not make her kneel. She is the reason Angola exists as a nation. Her name was Nzinga.